Welcome to the Exec Exchange, 15-minute podcast in which a leader from the water sector shares a story to inspire, inform and educate other water sector leaders from around the globe. My name is Piers Clark, and today my guest is the Chief Executive of Southern Water, Lawrence Gosden. Lawrence, wonderful to have you with us today.
Hi, Piers.
Now, regular listeners will be wondering what that background noise is, that trickling water, and that is because this is our first Out in the Field podcast, and I am standing by the River Anton, which feeds into the River Test, by a beautiful chalk stream that has been reinvigorated by some activity that Southern Water has undertaken. And we're going to be talking about exactly what it is Southern Water has done and why they did it. But, Lawrence, before we get into that, our audience love to know a little bit about our speaker. So tell me, what did you do before you became Chief Executive of Southern Water?
Well, I've been in the water sector my entire career, and I love it. It's genuinely the most incredible, diverse and complex sector. And once you're in it, it became very addictive. My first job was actually laying pipes, water and sewage rising mains for about 4 years prior to going to university. Didn't have a clue what I wanted to do and thought I'd just go and get this job with a little Irish contracting firm out of Brighton. Absolutely loved it. I'm still in contact with the guy who started that company in the 1970s now.
Excellent. So you then went to university. What did you study at university?
I did civil engineering at university. It's interesting looking back at your career and spotting these moments when somebody has inspired you. Because the only reason I did civil engineering was because I quite liked doing this pipe laying. Every day I got a brilliant wage in my pocket and a little brown envelope every Thursday. And then I could go out with all my friends, which was very important at that point. But I met the site engineer and I was always curious. I was always wanting to know what the next thing was. And I always wanted to drive the digger and then drive the dumpers. And then I got chatting to the site engineer, how do you do that? And that engineer told me to go and do civil engineering at university and inspired me to be able to do that. Now, the funny thing is, I met up with him about a year ago and just bumped into him and just said to him, do you realise that conversation we
all
had
your fault
36 years ago inspired me? So yes, I went off to Brighton University to do civil engineering and then came out of that back into the water sector and was involved as a project manager, delivering all the big urban wastewater projects that were running in the early 90s. When sewage really did go into the sea, built all these treatment plants everywhere. It took us to a point where about 95% is all fully treated before it's released now.
I've known you for 20 years or so, and you've got this really interesting background of having been both head of operations, which requires a certain mindset to be in operations. There's a burst pipe, it's 3 a.m, I need that sorted. Yet also been head of asset management, where that's a much more long-term strategic view. Do you see yourself as having both of those personalities?
I sort of see myself as, I need to understand purpose. So operation without purpose is just running day in, day out. It's quite soulless. So asset management is, I need to be able to understand where we are taking a series of operating assets in the short term, medium term, and through into the long term. And I think if you can always make sure that you've been able to connect in the action as part of a longer term strategy, then you are delivering with purpose. So whether you're running an operation, whether you're building capital projects, it sort of makes sense when you link it into long-term strategy.
Excellent. Now, Lawrence, for listeners who don't know anything about Southern Water, tell me where you are, who you serve, what sort of activities you do.
So Southern Water is a water and sewage company on the south coast of the UK. We cover the main counties of Kent, Sussex, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. We deliver wastewater services across that entire area, but on the water side of the organisation, we only actually supply about half of the region. The rest of it's supplied by some neighbouring water companies.
And just to link this back to your introduction, you said you went to university at Brighton, and Brighton is one of the key cities that Southern Water covers.
Absolutely it is. So yeah, Brighton, Hastings, Southampton, Portsmouth, all the way through to Canterbury and all the great cities of Kent.
Excellent. Right, we're going to move away from this stream, but you've got a sense of just how beautiful this stream is, just from the noise, I hope. Okay, we've now moved to a much quieter area. It's springtime and the willows are just beginning to come into bloom, and it's like a mirror in front of me. I can see the sky reflected in the clear crystal waters. Now, Lawrence, you were just telling me about why this particular bit of water is so important. Why is that?
It really is mesmerising, isn't it? I mean, the clarity of chalk rivers is just extraordinary. So the bit that we're looking at now is like a backwater off of the main channel. And the main channel is obviously running at a faster flow, so you get that nice scour that you want so that the fish can lay their eggs in those kind of areas. But you also need areas where the fish can chill out a little bit. and relax.
A fish hotel, I think you call it.
Fish hotel, exactly. So that's what this backwater section is doing, really. It's somewhere where they can take shelter, they can hide away from predators, and it gives them somewhere to chill out and rest a bit.
Awesome. Okay, we're now standing back by the river and I'm looking through the waters and I can see the white, chalky bottom of this stream. Lawrence, tell me about these chalk streams.
These are sort of a rainforest level important habitats. The UK has the world's greatest concentration of chalk rivers. They're extraordinary because they are not surface water led. They are mostly or almost entirely fed through aquifers, which means that the water that is coming into the chalk stream has been trickling through aquifers for a very, very long time. So hence you get this crystal clear, genuinely clear quality water, but it's also very cold. And the temperature of that water is very important because the temperature is also how you can safeguard these kinds of rivers against climate change.
Okay, Lawrence, we found a quiet place beside the river to delve into the key topic today, which is what you have been doing here. And I can hear some birds in the background, which are possibly coming through on the recording. But let's get into what is it you're doing here and why.
Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of history. Firstly, in order for chalk rivers, or in fact any river, to be successful, it needs three things. It needs water quality, it needs water volume, and it needs river morphology. So the river needs to be honest with you, not mucked around by human beings. With those three things, rivers can look after themselves very, very well. So what's happened here, when you go back in history, is a case study in human beings interfering with nature. So after the Second World War, the government incentivized farmers in the Dig for Britain incentive to give them money to make more agricultural land available, to generate more agricultural crops to feed the country and to get the country back in its feet. Totally understandable considering where the country was at that place, of course. But the consequence of that was on the River Anton, and in many places actually in the UK, was instead of having a lovely chalk river that's meandering across the bottom of a floodplain and doing its thing, creating its fish hotels naturally, with its oxbow lakes and doing all of the stuff that we've all learnt in geography lessons at school, they shifted the river to one side of the floodplain and made it a motorway. They made it deeper, they made it dead straight, and they turned it literally into a river motorway. And that drained the area.
And destroyed the chalk habitat that was there.
Completely overnight, ruined it entirely. So that not only took the level of the groundwater down, so that helped them with getting cows and sheep and agriculture, but at the same time, then it completely ruined those chalk rivers. So they were no longer able to form gravel scours and habitats where fish can lay their eggs and can do what they need to do. So what we're doing here is going back and reversing all of that work. And we have an incredible contractor who have just learned over many, many decades how to re-wiggle rivers, basically. It's a lovely expression. And that re-wiggling is simply big diggers digging up, creating a wiggle design where there was previously a straight motorway, digging out the ponds and giving the river a start back. And we're going to do about 7 kilometres of about 14 kilometres on the River Anton. By some stretch, the biggest river restoration projects in the UK. But when we first started, I have to say, when I came down to visit the project, it looked like a battlefield. It was horrific. And I remember standing there with the team saying, oh my goodness, we were supposed to be making things better. What is happening? Now, it is quite incredible how fast nature recovered. Within 1 year, the place was unrecognizable, covered in plant life. The ranunculus was back in the river. The fish were in the river doing their thing and laying their eggs. And it was quite incredible how fast nature recovers when you just give it a chance.
Excellent. So we're obviously talking about the stream today, but it would be foolhardy not to mention the ground that's around us. As we've walked along the stream, it's been this sort of spongy, black, peat-rich earth, which feels like, in its own right, a unique habitat that needs preserving and protecting.
Yeah, for sure it is. This is the water meadow that this valley is founded on. And underneath that is all the chalk, of course, which is providing all of the water through the aquifer for the chalk stream in front of this. But that peat is critical. Another consequence of draining the meadow to create more agriculture was that it started to dry out the peat. Now, when that peat dries out, it starts to react, it starts to give off carbon.
It's a carbon source, isn't it?
Correct. So a wonderful byproduct of doing this work to enable the water manure to be re-wetted, to allow the floodplains to work in the way that they originally did, means that the peat can breathe and it can do what it originally did as well, which means it becomes more of a carbon sink than a carbon fund.
Excellent. So you're reinvigorating 7 kilometers along this stretch of stream.
That's right. Yeah.
And how long do you think it'll take?
Oh, it's going to take years. The first kilometre or so has been done over about 2 years. But this is the start of a medium-term project. And you've got to do this stuff in harmony with nature.
I would have asked, what do you know now that you'd wish you'd known at the beginning of the project?
Not to panic when you see loads of earth and grounds and you see a battlefield. Don't panic at that point, because do you know what? You give nature a chance and it just says, haha, human beings, I'll show you. And then it comes back bouncing strong.
Now, we've got listenership from all across the globe. What advice would you give other water utility execs who might be thinking, hey, that's an interesting scheme. I wonder if I could do that in my area?
The reason we're doing this is about making these kind of rivers from which we abstract water to give to people in Hampshire more resilient and robust to climate change. And the way these rivers work, if you allow them to work properly, that means you've got a river temperature that stays cool even throughout the hot summer months. And that's really unique, because when you've got a surface water fed river, that heats up. So if you've got this cool water that's coming in, that means you've got a stable habitat, which is doing its thing to look after the fish. So practically, we're doing this work to make sure that the rivers in this area are more resilient, to enable us to abstract supplies in the way that we need to. Water companies and the water cycle is a fascinating thing. I think the days of being able to solve the problems of society related to water using your own assets are gone. There's a little bit maybe left in that. You can plug a bit more technology on the end of pipes for sure. But embracing the entire water cycle and looking for solutions in that middle bit, in catchments, is now a massive part of the armory of water progress. And look, we would love to talk more about this. So if anybody wants to find out a bit more about how practically we've done this, how we've funded it, how we've done some of those more pragmatic elements, then please get in touch. We'd be delighted to share.
Projects like this don't happen just because one person's got a good idea. How many people, how many corporations have been involved to make this become a reality?
Oh, I would say well over a dozen organisations engaged.
Planners to contractors to environmental scientists.
For sure, but wider than that, to landowners, to the Rivers Trust. I mean, this work is done through NGOs. These green skills that you need to be able to do this kind of work is through that route. So the Rivers Trust have been extraordinary. The landowners and some of the associations that are engaging the local communities in the project, it's important everybody's involved. This is a nationally significant project. And the more that those communities are engaged in that, the more power to their elbow.
Excellent. Okay, I'm slightly out of breath because we've just walked up the hill. We're now back at the car park. It's been absolutely wonderful, Lawrence, taking me around this site and seeing things. I could have spent the whole day doing this. Now, we always finish with a personal question, which is asking you to go back 36 years. What advice would you give a young Lawrence Gosden if you could speak to him today?
Oh, well, I've got a whole list, I think, probably. I was a hugely driven young man who was out for everything and was kind of running at everything at like a million miles an hour. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned over my entire career is the power of just going a little bit slower and just really valuing the people around you. The single most important thing in companies is the people in the companies. And it's a massively obvious statement, but it can get so overlooked. Companies are not just about profit lines. They're about people. They're about the good that people can do when they're in those companies. That's the soul in the business. If you've got soul, then you've got a company that knows why it's in business. And that's extraordinarily powerful.
You have been listening to the Exec Exchange with me, Piers Clark, and I have spent a wonderful afternoon wandering around the southeast of England looking at an astonishing project to re-wiggle the River Anton with the Chief Executive of Southern Water, Lawrence Gosden.
Thank you to our sponsors, and until next time, keep asking questions, keep sharing, and keep safe.